This time our guest is the former President of the United States, Obama. When Bear heard that Obama was coming, even he, used to seeing many international celebrities, was shivering with nervousness. However, due to the Secret Service closing the nearby airspace, Bear had to disembark from the plane early and walk to the agreed meeting point to see Obama. The former president was excited for the wilderness adventure with Bear, noting how the constant Secret Service protection in his daily life limited his freedom and made him look forward to the adventure. Bear arrived early at the rendezvous, determined not to be late for this meeting, and even prayed he wouldn't misspeak from nervousness when meeting the president. Obama arrived leisurely, and after a friendly greeting, they embarked on a safe, short route through ice river deposits and dense forests to reach the base of a glacier. Shortly into the forest, they found bear fur on a branch. Bear explained that bears can be aggressive during nursing and mating seasons. To this, Obama quipped, "Aren't humans the same?" After the forest, they reached a cliff with many rocks below. Bear picked up a stone slab for his pocket and a golden ragwort, a great plant for tea, planning a luxurious lunch for Obama, who shook his head with a resigned smile. They reached the outlet of an Alaskan glacier, part of the Harding Icefield, the largest in the U.S., covering 300 square miles. Noting the valley had been a glacier since 2008 and was melting rapidly, Obama emphasized his call for environmental awareness. They took a great selfie next to the beautiful scenery. Obama, wanting more photos, used his own phone for another shot. Lunchtime arrived, and they set up a stone stove for a picnic at the glacier's base, using a fire striker and cotton balls to light a fire. Obama, eager to try, quickly ignited it. With the fire going, Bear asked Obama to fetch water for cooking the tea. Although they didn't encounter any bears for a feast, Bear found a salmon half-eaten by a bear and cooked it. Obama decided on a dessert of his own making, marshmallow cookies. He toasted a marshmallow on a stick, then sandwiched it between two cookies. Upon seeing the unusual color, Bear was stunned by this dark cuisine. After a candid review from Bear, he served the cooked dishes and tea to Obama. Full and satisfied, they chatted merrily, but the enjoyable time was brief. After a wonderful day, they hugged and exchanged blessings, concluding this episode's challenge. This episode's challenge features guest O'Neal, who scored over 2,800 points in 19 NBA seasons and won 4 championships. How will such a dominant player spark with Bear in the wild? Before setting off, O'Neal was full of confidence, at times wielding weapons, showing off his Chinese kung fu, and even boldly challenging Bear to wrap a python around his neck and expressing a willingness to eat bugs and drink his own urine. However, reality was harsh. The next moment, O'Neal was too scared to board the plane, standing weak-kneed. Bear had no choice but to drag O'Neal aboard. They flew over the Adirondack Mountains, an area known for its lush vegetation and steep terrain, and arrived above a lake where they would parachute down. O'Neal's massive frame plummeted into the lake, stirring up mud from the bottom. After reaching the shore, O'Neal declared to the camera that he comes from a military family. Next, he charged through the forest like a rhino, crushing any obstacle in his path and mocking Bear for taking detours just for a few leaves. Soon, they reached a cliff, and O'Neal was stunned when Bear said they had to climb it. Facing the high cliff, O'Neal trembled internally, but covered up his fear by explaining that his previous basketball dunking had left him with shoulder issues, making it painful to exert force. Bear wasn't swayed and instructed him to use a grappling hook. O'Neal thought it wouldn't be a problem, but the next second, the hook was nowhere to be seen. After Bear demonstrated successfully, O'Neal hesitated and confessed his fear of heights, wishing Bear could just pull him up with a truck. Bear had to pull the rope to help O'Neal, who struggled with the physical effort. Reaching the top, O'Neal was emotionally exhausted, reminiscing about his impoverished childhood and becoming the breadwinner of his family at 18. Earning his first $40 million before age 20, which impressed Bear. After a rest and chat, they continued forward. Suddenly, Bear found something and picked it up. O'Neal inquired, and Bear excitedly explained it was a moose placenta for their dinner. As dusk fell, Bear decided to make camp. He threw leaves over O'Neal's head, wrapping him in leaves, making him feel like a giant Christmas tree. Bear explained they would sleep among the leaves that night for waterproofing and warmth. Next, it was time to make a fire and cook. Bear effortlessly found some tinder and asked O'Neal to try starting the fire. It might have been O'Neal's first time making a fire outdoors. Once lit, he joyfully raised his hands in excitement. Meanwhile, Bear pulled out a meaty object from his backpack. It was a deer placenta, and he was ready to cook it. O'Neill, visibly shocked, asked if they shouldn't wash it first. Watching the washed placenta, Bear salivated, causing O'Neill to frown. After Bear stir-fried it, their delicious dinner was quickly ready. Bear eagerly tasted it and declared it absolutely delicious. He then tore off a piece and handed it to O'Neill, who hesitated but eventually ate it. That night, Bear was fast asleep beside O'Neill, who lay wide-eyed, unable to sleep. Early the next morning, Bear woke up early and roused the sleeping O'Neill, who now felt refreshed. With yesterday's experience, O'Neill was full of confidence, but he was soon taken aback. They now faced a 20-meter-high steep cliff that they had to climb down. As O'Neill descended using the rope, an accident almost occurred, but with Bear's help, he slid down to the cliff base, hugging a tree. It was then Bear's turn to descend, which seemed much easier. Once at the bottom, O'Neill caught him with his shoulder, followed by a heartfelt hug from O'Neill. They then continued through the woods and finally emerged onto a road, signs of civilization. O'Neill excitedly kissed the asphalt road. Suddenly a logging truck approached, and after climbing aboard, they praised each other. The journey ended with O'Neill's kiss. This episode's guest is American action film star Michelle, known for her roles in Resident Evil and Fast and Furious, which have grossed millions at the box office. How will this tough woman and Bear spark in the wild? The challenge location for Michelle and Bear is the Red Desert in Nevada, known for its labyrinth-like cliffs and scorching temperatures. Before starting, Michelle told the cameraman she was both excited and nervous. Bear arrived in a gyrocopter, strapped a parachute to Michelle without asking, and took her onto the plane. Michelle was unaware of just how crazy her companion was. After giving her a brief on skydiving, the plane reached the jump point. Michelle seemed lost in thought as Bear, without saying another word, pushed her out of the plane. He followed with a somersault. As Bear landed and Michelle was still floating in the sky, a scream was heard. Bear urgently radioed for her, but there was no response. He quickly ran towards Michelle's direction, fortunately finding her safe. This completely thrilled Michelle, and didn't walk long before finding themselves amidst red rocks and desert, blocked by a high cliff ahead. The only way forward now was to rappel from the mountaintop, so Bear tied himself and Michelle together. Michelle led the way down, while Bear controlled the direction and protected her from behind. After descending the first rock slope, they faced an even higher cliff. To gauge its height, they simply threw a stone down, which fell at a rate of 30 meters per second. When Michelle counted to 5, the stone hit the ground, proving the cliff was 150 meters high. Michelle stepped back in fright, but Bear found a cave, tied the rope there, and then they rappelled down. For Bear, it was effortless, and he reached the bottom in seconds. Under his guidance, Michelle quickly mastered the technique and soon landed successfully. Before she could catch her breath, Bear took her to a vertical 90-degree cliff. They needed to climb up through a crevice in the cliff. Michelle thought Bear was joking at first, but seeing no alternative path from him, she followed suit. First, they threw a rope with a knot into a crevice at the cliff's top. Bear climbed up first to demonstrate, and when it was Michelle's turn, she got stuck in the crevice. With Bear pulling, she finally climbed up. As both were exhausted, Bear decided to replenish their energy, targeting a rat. They then found a natural rock barrier to set up camp for the night. Bear used a parachute to make a makeshift hammock for Michelle, then started to prepare dinner. He skinned the rat, removed its innards, and planned to make a nourishing soup, but there wasn't enough water in the kettle, cooking the rat in urine. Michelle was shocked. Reluctantly, she went behind a rock with a cup and soon returned with a steaming cup of urine. The specially treated Jerry was indescribable. Bear took a sip, then handed it to Michelle. After tasting it, she remarked it was similar to chicken. Bear then took a big gulp of the special soup, calling it spicy. Michelle took a sip and screamed, almost keeling over. Perhaps because of too much soup during the day, Bear couldn't sleep at night due to the unpleasant smell. The next day, as the sun rose, Michelle was slow to get out of bed. Bear picked some ephedra sprouts to perk her up. Then, they continued on their journey across the rugged peaks, which now seemed effortless to Michelle. Bear chose one of the most challenging exits, a rock spire over 100 meters high. Climbing to the top would not be easy. With Bear's constant encouragement, they finally reached the summit. Nearby, Bear pointed to two off-road motorcycles, declaring them their escape vehicles. Michelle's fearless spirit impressed Bear. Likely her boldness and genuine attitude had won many people's affection. Thus, their journey concluded perfectly. Today, Bear will join Kate, who starred in Titanic, for an adventure in the Snowdonia mountain range in the UK, known for its towering peaks and steep gorges. Before setting off, Kate was full of confidence, excited about the adventure. Bear rode his specially prepared vehicle to meet her. Upon meeting, Kate was thrilled. Bear planned to use the gear to fly with Kate to the highest part of the mountain. After landing precisely on a rock-free area, they packed up their equipment and set off along a planned route. The area had no roads, only cliffs and rocks, a perfect training ground for the special forces. Kate's first challenge was to descend a vertical 90-degree cliff. Without a hanging section, it was 40 to 50 meters high. Kate's mind went blank, questioning her life choice. But Bear remained calm, securing a rope in a rock crevice and attaching the other end to Kate. As she started her descent, her legs went weak. As the rope lowered her bit by bit, Bear continued to roar encouragement, telling her not to look down. Kate stumbled down the cliff, finally reaching the halfway point safely. Bear then slid down in less than 3 seconds, landing right beside Kate. His skill was undeniable. The climb had frightened Kate, so to calm her nerves, Bear thoughtfully offered her hot tea and homemade beef jerky. After a short break, they continued on their journey. At this point, the slope was covered with huge rocks. They continued along the cliff and finally reached the summit. However, it was not suitable for camping, so they headed down towards the flatland at the mountain base. When passing a lake, Bear planned to store some water but instead found their dinner for the night, a small trout. Watching the trembling trout in the water, Bear scooped it up with one swift move and, while Kate wasn't looking, slipped it into her clothes. They then planned to camp by the lake. Bear gathered moss and heather for bedding and even fantasized about sharing a tent. While Bear was troubled about starting a fire, Kate pulled out her sanitary pad and lipstick from her bag, prompting Bear to marvel at how a woman's bag is a survival treasure chest. With these items, she quickly started a campfire. He then decided to find some food to ease the awkwardness, and worms became the victims. After grilling them on a slab, Bear tasted one and passed another to Kate, who immediately regretted it, claiming it tasted like burnt wires. Her expression said it all. Fortunately, the fish tasted much better. The next day, Kate got up early to pack her gear, eager for today's challenge, but Bear was slow to start, prompting Kate to constantly urge him on, saying he was like an old woman. Chatting casually, they soon reached a vertical coastline, and the yacht floating offshore was their return vehicle. The thought of going home today made Kate so happy that she gave Bear a passionate kiss, firing him up to sprint down. Kate was stunned by this. With yesterday's experience, today's challenge was less daunting for Kate. She carefully walked down, mimicking Bear. Halfway down, Bear told her to let go and run, but Kate was still hesitant. However, with Bear's encouragement, she successfully ran down. Next, they dropped their gear and swam straight for the yacht. However, boarding the yacht proved to be the biggest challenge of the survival experience for Kate. Bear had no choice but to jump into the water and pushed her up with all his might. With that, their journey came to a perfect conclusion. She had starred in a romantic comedy that grossed $500 million and had received Golden Globe and Oscar nominations at the age of 19. This time, Bear would take her to the Dolomites. Before setting off, Kate, like a child, admitted her hatred for helicopters, only to hear the propeller sounds shortly after, causing her smile to freeze. Suddenly, Bear appeared from the sky, nearly asking her if she was surprised or not. The first step of the journey was to descend to the ground from an aerial cable car using ropes. As Bear slowly lowered the rope, Kate screamed in terror from 50 meters in the air. Once she safely reached the ground, Bear quickly rappelled down after her. Next, they had to cross the Dolomites in 2 days, starting with a snow-covered path where the deepest parts could bury their knees. Fortunately, Kate was in good spirits, chatting and laughing with Bear. However, traveling with a man who conquers nature meant facing nature's perils. They soon arrived at a cliff base where Bear led Kate to climb barehanded. The slope was easy for Bear, who quickly climbed up and then pulled Kate up by a rope, allowing her to follow his footsteps. However, Walking in the snow had already drained Kate's energy, and the large backpack made it even more difficult. Although she smiled, inside she was panicking. Finally trembling, she reached the summit, and as a reward, Bear handed her chocolate and a pack of nuts. Kate quickly devoured them. Bear, leading Kate, who suffered from claustrophobia, guided her through a dark tunnel, reassuring her it was only 40 to 50 meters long while making a face behind her back. They entered the tunnel where it was pitch black, and they could only proceed with the help of flashlights. The tunnel was filled with small, dark, and eerie rooms, like a haunted house from a movie where spirits might appear at any moment. As they advanced, they found the bunker complex was like a maze. Kate just wanted to get out quickly, but they got lost under Bear's leadership. Fortunately, Bear was experienced and marked their route on the ground with the liquid from glow sticks, allowing them to navigate successfully. While searching for a way out, Bear discovered several live creatures in a small room. Upon seeing a few pigeons, his eyes lit up. He instructed Kate to drive the pigeons into the room while he covered the exit with cloth. Bear then swiftly wrung a pigeon's neck. Finally, they found the exit. Kate thought the dawn of hope was just ahead, but when she pried open the iron bars, she saw a 100-meter cliff in front. This didn't deter Bear. He took out a rope, ready to lead Kate down quickly. Leaning against a rock, Kate's expression grew serious as she radiated regret from within. When she heard they would descend together, she began to doubt Bear's capability with the rope. Bear led a screaming Kate down slowly until they reached the base. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, the two found a somewhat flat area on the mountainside to set up camp. Bear used a rope to stretch 2 cloaks between trees, then cut branches to lay on the ground. When dinner time came, Bear prepared to start a fire. He grabbed a few ants from a nest on the ground, crushed them, and ate them. Kate also ate too, symbolically, and instantly felt like ants were crawling in her throat. In survival situations, lighters are out of the question. It was time for Bear to show real skill. He took out the old bullets he found in the tunnel, poured out the gunpowder, and sparked it with flint to light a fire. Now with a fire, it was time for the pigeon. Bear plucked it barehanded, quickly removed the meat, skewered it on a stick, and started roasting. As night fell, the day ended. The next day, Kate's eyes were swollen. Not everyone can sleep well in such conditions. Bear quickly gathered some snow to reduce Kate's swelling and packed up to continue their journey. The snow on the mountain had turned to ice, making the path treacherous. Bear helped Kate forward. As they crossed the icy surface and passed through a stream to the upstream of a waterfall, they found the scenery beautiful, but the abyss beneath their feet terrifying. The waterfall's base was their end point, and Kate was about to face her final challenge, a vertical descent to the bottom of the waterfall. Bear pushed a piece of dead wood over the cliff, and a few seconds later, a dull thud echoed, making Kate imagine the sound of a body falling. Her legs went weak, and she collapsed on the rock. The rope came into play again, but Kate still questioned its safety. Bear quickly descended to the bottom and tugged on Kate's rope. Reluctantly, she began her slow descent alone and finally reached the cliff base safely, successfully ending the challenge. He gained countless fans with his roles in Iron Man and the Avengers. So, what sparks will fly when this superhero teams up with Bear in the wilderness today? Don will join Bear to take on the challenging terrain of Mount White, a place rarely visited by humans and dominated by rushing rivers. They arrived by helicopter, landing in a frigid lake where the water reached above their knees as they walked ashore. Bear immediately pulled out bear spray, remarking that they weren't at the top of the food chain here. Not long after, they found a deer antler. Following the principle of using everything available, Bear packed it into Don's backpack. They soon discovered bear tracks, a clear sign they had entered the territory of a dominant bear and needed to be very cautious. Their path was blocked by a waterfall 50 meters high, but Bear, ever resourceful, devised a plan. He tied the deer antler to a rope and threw it across to create a zip line over the waterfall. Don had no choice but to follow Bear's lead. Bear then secured the other end of the rope to a tree, completing the zip line. Still skeptical about the antler's strength, Don let Bear go first to test it. Seeing Bear cross successfully, Don braved the crossing himself, relying entirely on his arm strength when he was suspended mid-air. Yet again, Bear's judgment proved correct, and Don safely reached the other side of the waterfall. Bear and Don found a dead porcupine in a pond. Grabbing the porcupine by the ear, asked Don to cut open the porcupine's belly. Upon seeing the intestines spill out, it was clear that the meat was inedible, much to their disappointment. Don remarked that if he had to cut open another animal carcass for food, he might end up fighting Bear. Fortunately, they soon discovered a bird's nest. Lacking the skill to climb trees barehanded, they needed an alternative approach. Bear had a brainwave. He stuffed some stones into a sock and tied it with a rope. By swinging it over a tree branch, Bear could pull Don up the tree. Once ready, they began climbing to collect eggs and found 3 bird eggs, securing their dinner for the evening. This relieved Don as night was approaching and they needed to find a place to camp. They chose a flat area, spread out a canvas, and tied the corners to the trees, creating a simple, ventilated tent. After a long day, both men were craving meat, so they started digging for earthworms to eat. Next, Bear was ready to showcase his impressive cooking skills. He first smashed the bird eggs, shells included, into a jar. Then, he mashed them with a stick. Bear explained that the eggshells were a good source of calcium. Without spices, the food wouldn't be palatable. So Bear came up with the idea of using bear spray, which is full of chili powder. They placed the jar 2 meters away and sprayed it. This created a delicious worm and chili fried egg dish. They used branches as chopsticks, and each found the taste delightful. As night fell, the continuous sounds of animals in the forest frightened Don. The next morning, after drinking spruce tea, they headed down the mountain. They encountered a cliff with the extraction point on an iron bridge below. The cliff was the final barrier. The only way down was to rappel. Looking down the steep cliff, Don was terrified. He secured a rope to a large tree. As usual, Bear went first. The secret to rappelling was to hold the rope with the right hand and use the left for braking, keeping the center of gravity controlled and legs apart. Bear quickly rappelled down the cliff amid the sound of the rope friction. While Don hesitated, he eventually gathered the courage to slide down. The wet, slippery rock offered no footholds, so he relied solely on arm strength and the rope to descend. With Bear's encouragement, Don landed safely, marking the final phase of their journey. They crossed the forest to a large iron bridge, with the extraction point above. They had to use a rope and a rope ladder to climb onto the bridge. Bear demonstrated his extraordinary skills again. However, for Don, the rusty and unevenly shaped iron girders were tough to grip, and he could only insert the tips of his toes into small openings, offering limited leverage. The rope ladder was the most challenging part as it was soft and uncontrollable, compounded by the bridge's obstructions. Don's every muscle strained as he climbed, but his well-developed muscles played a key role, and he quickly climbed onto the bridge. Once on the hand-cranked rail car, their challenge concluded. This place, the wild kingdom of the South African savannah. Today, Bear will lead the dancer Julianne across the perilous savannah. They ride mountain bikes on a relatively flat stretch of road, encountering a giraffe along the way. They continue onward, and soon stop to watch a pair of elephants on a date. They find a pile of warm elephant dung, which excites Bear. He even collects the greenish fluid dripping from it for Julianne to squeeze into a bottle. As the terrain becomes rougher and biking impossible, they proceed on foot, crossing broken rocks to reach the mountaintop. To descend to the valley below, they must rappel down, but doing so means they can't retrieve the rope if it's tied to a rock. Julianne pulls out a deodorant bottle from her backpack, and Bear wraps the rope around it, wedging it into a crevice. Their combined weight begins to deform the can. At the valley's base, Bear suddenly gets nervous and urges Julianne to lie down because 2 cheetahs are flirting nearby. Unlike the herbivorous elephants, cheetahs will relentlessly pursue prey, so discretion is the better part of valor. They must quickly retreat. After escaping danger, they encounter a snake blocking their path. Julianne, terrified, while Bear teases the snake with a stick. Next, Bear and Julianne find a cave by a stream where they plan to camp for the night. To ward off wild animals, they must start a campfire. And now with the fire going, Bear sets out to look for food. He parted the bushes and found some butterfly larvae. Bear was pleasantly surprised to see the meat. Back at camp, he first emptied the collected elephant dung water, then threw the larvae into it. After boiling it over a fierce fire, their delicious journey began. Bear tasted it first, but had overcooked the larvae a bit. Julianne followed suit, placing a larva in her mouth and then sipping the thick broth. In the morning, Julianne brushed her teeth with stream water, but the foul taste still lingered in her mouth. Their journey today would be very challenging. First, They had to cross a stream where the damp rocks were very slippery. They had to tread carefully, as slipping and hitting the hard rocks would make it difficult to get up. Halfway up a small waterfall, their path was blocked by rocks, so they had to crawl through a narrow gap. Julianne, leveraging her dancer's agility, quickly made it through, but Bear nearly got stuck as the rocks firmly wedged against his shapely buttocks. After struggling, Bear finally made it over. Crossing the stream, they reached the base of a cliff. The cliff was very steep and smooth with no stable footholds, making climbing impossible. Fortunately, Bear had prepared by placing a rope ladder on the cliff. However, climbing the soft rope ladder required strength and balance. Bear, with his experience, quickly climbed up. Julianne, with her daring and good coordination, steadily climbed after him, undeterred even by the sheer drop beneath her feet. She successfully reached the summit. Next, they had to find the helicopter coming to pick them up. Upon spotting the helicopter, Julianne set off a flare. The helicopter lowered a rope, which they secured around themselves, and were then hoisted away from the savannah, concluding the challenge.